These scenarios are focused on the countries of the northern Mozambique Channel, a region emerging as a globally important hotspot for the diversity and health of its coastal and ocean ecosystems, as well as a major source of natural gas. A similar context is shared by other countries of East and Southern Africa or the Western Indian Ocean, so the scenarios may equally apply to these. These scenarios were developed to assist countries in implementing the Sustainable Development Goals, and particularly number 14 on oceans, and to look beyond 2030 towards a longer-term sustainable future. Scenarios present alternative ways the future may unfold. They indicate possibilities that must be plausible and relevant, but they're not predictions of the future and don't present a preferred future. Other futures may also be possible. These four reflect the consensus of over 100 participants in this scenarios process. They selected two main axes around which the scenarios are constructed: the type and quality of governance, from good to poor, and the level of investment, from high to low. Many other drivers are also important and are woven through the stories. Over the next 30 years, the Mozambique Channel is likely to experience major economic development and demographic growth, perhaps amongst the highest in Africa. Unless these changes are effectively managed, there is substantial risk that the region's rich marine resources will be unsustainably exploited and impacted. As a result, the lives of millions of people who directly rely on these resources could take a turn for the worse. Welcome to these 4 short stories about what may happen in the near future.
Scenario 1. Slow but sure. In this story, the sea is becalmed. There is little wind and the progress of the ship is slow. But the crew are good and able to make the most of their situation. It is 2018. The country is self-contained with a strong national identity and egalitarian principles. Unlike its neighbors, it has no natural gas or mineral resources. Coastal communities depend on fisheries and local resources. The state is the main national employer. The government prioritizes high-quality public healthcare and education. Working closely with communities, it oversees careful stewardship of the country's rich ecosystems. But a growing population is putting increasing pressure on the natural resource base and on public services. Young people are frustrated and feel their leaders are out of touch. In 2020, cyclones, drought, and floods strike the area. Intact coastal ecosystems and effective health services mean damage is not as grave as in neighboring countries. Nevertheless, the challenge of recovery strains a nation's customary confidence. Youth continue to push for a new agenda, and this time the government listens. It is now 2030. The last decade has seen considerable political change with representation from older and younger generations, women and men, and across civil society. Those in power have shown themselves able to compromise, and the transitions have been peaceful. Throughout, government has prioritized the restoration of ecosystems and building community resilience. When Hurricane Hasira strikes in 2033, losses are low. The country is lauded as a model of best practice in climate adaptation. By contrast, attempts to draw in foreign investment to promote economic growth have not been as successful. Unemployment remains high, and tensions grow as frustrated youth see neighboring economies booming. With a growing population and sluggish economy, what options does this country have for the future? Riding the wave. In this story, the wind is strong and steady, powering the ship forward. A skilled captain and crew steer expertly through the challenges on the way. It is 2018. This country is blessed with rich natural gas and mineral resources. Its governance is based on broad civil society engagement, forward-thinking leadership, and inclusive development. The economy is thriving thanks to well-managed foreign investment and judicious use of resources. However, population growth and the pressures of development present a growing challenge. The government struggles to rein in social and economic demands and strike a balance for longer-term environmental security. Rapid development brings challenging social change. In 2020, cyclones, drought, and floods strike the region. There is extensive damage to remaining coastal ecosystems and to new developments along the shoreline. The health service response proves inadequate. Hundreds of thousands of people are displaced and hundreds of lives are lost. The experience prompts a new government push to build resilience to climate change, reaching across all sectors to develop a blue economy. It is now 2030. Over the last decade, income from natural gas has been reinvested in economic diversification, accelerating the growing prosperity. Far-sighted policies direct the natural gas income into financing renewable energy innovations and a national zero-carbon vision for the future. Gas income has also financed the restoration of ecosystems, sustainable aquaculture, and building resilience to climate change. Government and business partnerships demonstrate leadership at national levels as well as in regional dialogue and agreements. But the demand for growth is hard to rein in, and the furious pace of construction expands over vulnerable coastal areas. When Hurricane Hasira strikes in 2033, there is extensive damage and loss of property. Thanks to prior planning and investment in disaster relief, the country is able to cope. So far, so good, but challenges lie ahead. As the population grows and migrants flock to its shores, how will the country balance economic growth with sustaining and securing its valuable coastal ecosystems? Pirate ship. In this story, the wind is gusting, the waves are high, and sharks are circling. Without a strong rudder and captain, the ship is buffeted from one side to another, losing people and cargo overboard, mindless to the losses. It is 2018. This country was built on trade and has now grown into a modern capitalist state. With abundant gas and mineral resources, it is a magnet for ever-expanding investment. The political and business elite pursue an investment free-for-all, with little concern for social and environmental values. The economy booms and the wealthy enjoy the good life. But for the majority, conditions are tough. An active civil society strives to bring attention to environmental and social issues which are critical for longer-term health, wealth, and stability. When cyclones, drought, and floods strike the region in 2020, losses are enormous and the state response is inadequate. This results in public anger and riots that are brutally suppressed. Civil society is forced to focus on relief, filling the gaps in the government's response. Meanwhile, corporate and government elites quietly turn to focus on the emerging natural gas wealth. It is now 2030. As wealth from natural gas flows, the economy booms. but inequality continues to grow. Growth in middle-class jobs is outpaced by the faster-growing workforce, rising cost of living and worsening social safeguards. The lowest-income families cram into burgeoning urban slums, spilling over coastal plains and waterways. Inadequate attempts have been made to restore ecosystems damaged in 2020. Urbanization, growing population, and increasing inequality has led to collapse in important fisheries and loss of mangroves and coral reefs. When Hurricane Hasira strikes in 2033, there is unprecedented flooding and ensuing epidemics in coastal slums that could have been avoided with prior planning. Thousands of lives are lost. The extent of the disaster reinvigorates civil society, and foreign governments begin to speak out. Under growing pressure, the government commissions an inquiry into the causes of unrest. Will change result? Can the trend of short-term thinking, rising inequality, and state capture be reversed? All pain, no gain. In this story, there is no wind to power the ship. The captain and crew lack skills and are dispirited. The ship wallows and falls into disrepair. It is 2018. The country is governed by tribalist populist leaders and is characterized by corruption and mismanagement. With no gas or mineral resources, most investors keep well away. In the absence of effective government machinery, the informal sector is thriving and dynamic, and for a time, left to themselves, life is good for many. But with no long-term vision, high population growth and lack of investment has led to overexploitation of wood, fish, and other resources, and thus to the degradation of critical ecosystems. When cyclones, drought, and floods strike the region in 2020, the country is crippled. Many deaths result from the storms and even more from the preventable epidemics that follow. The disasters fuel social discord and migration to neighboring countries. Disillusionment with the state bubbles over. It is now 2030. Repeated cycles of tribal politics continue. Each new government comes into power making fresh promises which come to nothing. Lacking natural gas, the energy sector mines the country's coal reserves to generate power. In the home, women now cook with coal. Over the last decade, civil society organizations supported by the country's diaspora and foreign donors have grown to fill the gaps in government services. When Hurricane Hasira strikes in 2033, there has been no prior investment in repairing coastal ecosystems, nor in disaster response. The damage to infrastructure and the economy and the loss of human life dwarf the 2020 events. The resulting social disruption and breakdown in governance caused the 2033 elections to collapse in disarray. The country becomes the archetypal 21st century failed state. Where does it go from here? How can the country turn around when financial, social, political, and environmental pressures all push in one direction?
There is clearly a country that has been dealt the best hand of cards, where governance and investment are both good or high, and another which has the worst, where governance and investment are both low. But each country can make its own decisions based on their cards. Their fate is not determined only by the cards. There are nuances across the stories and elements in different stories that you might recognize from your country or a neighbor today, in the recent past, or imaginable in the near future. The metaphor of the ocean journey captures the uncertainties of a country's development pathway, and that there is always another step to be made. So the scenarios all end with further questions revolving around improvements or regressions in governance or investment, trends and interactions with other drivers, and their consequences. But the key question, if you use the scenarios, is what action would you take if this scenario plays out in your country?